every one person or whoever's gonna watch this. I want to talk about family lineages, and I'm going to use a personal example because typically a lot of the things that I talk about happen because I have lived it in my own life and I've really navigated my way through that particular thing. So in this case, it's to do with these quote unquote inherited things that we have from our family members. And I already texted my mom and told her, this isn't a clap back. I said, I want to talk about this. And really, ultimately, I got to a place where I'm really grateful for what it was that my mom brought up. Because what she was speaking, what she said, and I'm going to go through a bunch of different examples here of what I'm talking about when I say this. But she said, because I had gone to the store today to get, I actually bought this shirt. And it was like a thrift store. And I got in the car and I called her and I was telling her, I was like, yeah, you know, my back just really hurts. My lower back. And she's like, oh, you got that Blair back. It's that Blair back. And I was like, and I already remember from being at her house over the holidays that there was another situation like that. I don't remember what it was though. And I was like, I do not consent. I do not want to take this belief as part of my own belief, because it's a totally different paradigm. And so when we think about genetics from a very like maybe third dimensional perspective of just inheriting it, one thing is naturally going to be passed on to the next person. But that's not really taking into account the consciousness evolution of each successive generation, because each successive generation has the potential to actually shift their genetic code through shifting their consciousness. So, I mean, I'm like, the way that I care for my body is very different from the way that the rest of my family members take care of their body. So we don't have to act like genetics and this inherited, oh, you're going to have this kind of back and that must be why your back was hurting and it's the same thing. It's like we don't really necessarily doesn't have to be some mystical thing. It's like, no, just look at the way that these individuals have taken care of themselves. Look at the type of consciousness that's feeding that kind of mentality. And it makes perfect sense why you would see disease in the body, or why you would see like a lack of resiliency or flexibility or long-term health issues, or, you know, whatever it is. So yeah, that's that's the first place that I want to start off. And I want to give a couple of examples because maybe your own family members have done this, and it's sort of this unconscious way that I think we all try to identify our own pain. It's like we want to, especially if we're like tied to that and we're not really doing anything in our lives to shift a certain kind of behavior, then it makes sense why we would want to like reach out to the people around us or that are close to us, and as soon as they say something that links up, to want to attach them to that same narrative. I think that's just a very human thing, but it's also like we have to understand that this is a very multidimensional reality. So there's people who are really living quite literally in different paradigms where different things are possible because of the consciousness that you're dealing with and what that consciousness believes is possible and the way that it's interacting and creating with reality. So some of the family things that you might see are like in my case, back problems. Okay, we really have to look at, well, first of all, is there structural issues? Are we looking at somebody who's extremely overweight? That could certainly cause some things. Are we looking at emotion? Can we look at the emotions? What's happening? Are these people overburdening themselves? Are they what's their belief system around work and responsibility. You know, we just start to dig into a person and see that the physical body is really following the consciousness of a person. So that consciousness is what's feeding not only what we're seeing manifesting in the physical, but also what we're seeing manifest in the mental body. So things like mental illness, you might say, oh, bipolar runs in the family, or depression runs in the family, or anxiety. It's like, well, what kind of consciousness and what kind of society and environment do we have? Like, you know, it doesn't have to continue. So it's really my belief that every successive generation that's coming through is the more evolved version of that consciousness. But we also need to have a connection to the history and the lineage from which we came from, so that we know what it is that we need to transcend and evolve through. And I mean, transcend's kind of like, you know, a weird word for some people, but to integrate and to really resolve so that those patterns can stop with us. This is like the most important thing, that it's the most important work, in my opinion, that anybody could ever do. Because if you want to live in a world where people are not programmed and where people are kind, it starts with every single one of us deprogramming ourselves from all of these inherited traumas, and so much of it literally lives in our DNA. So even if we haven't lived something in this lifetime, and I really don't like to go into past lives because people can scapegoat their trauma that they haven't identified in this lifetime because of past lifetimes, but ultimately it's all connected. And so we're weaving our way and sort of untangling ourselves from those narratives by actually healing those wounds, and then making sure that our behavior and how we treat ourselves and the people around us really reflects something like a being who's practicing having some kind of aware consciousness, an ability to hold polarity and opposites, and to really sit with ourselves and other people in a more objective way, which is going to be super just important for all of us. And it's a never-ending thing. So we should just remember that. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to add. Yeah, just that, oh, well, I guess some of the other family lineage things you might hear, it's like, oh, heart problems, obesity, diabetes, and heart problems is interesting too. Like, you can look at whatever the specific ailment is, and not only can you look at it from a perspective of what are the physical things that could be contributing to that I don't want to continue feeding, like poor diet or exercise or beliefs, right? We have to look at the thoughts and the beliefs and what we're making those things mean. But also we can look at the emotional structure of a particular organ like the heart and see, well, what's happening with our heart and what's causing it to have issues. Cheating, maybe, love, heartbreak. We could really think about it in a literal sense, but you have to feel into it for yourself for what's happening there. So again, like I was saying in the beginning, it can actually be kind of a gift to know, well, what are those things that have just, maybe they've skipped a generation, but they're still in there. You can feel it in your day-to-day life, and where can you take action then to start to clear those things so that we're not pouring our stuff out on other people unconsciously. Because we're all doing it all day long, and we really have to stop doing that. But like I said, it's a life's work. Yeah, and the collective purge, that was the last thing that, everything that we're seeing right now is, that was a real cliffhanger, is a lot of these patterns coming up in a very collective kind of way so that we can all see ourselves, because it's very obvious for some people. We're all living in very different paradigms and realities. But no matter what angle you're looking at it from, maybe you're looking at it from multiple perspectives, maybe you're zooming all the way out and seeing what's really happening here. But with that, being able to see all these different perspectives, I just lost my train of thought for a second. I was like going into this like, the collective purge, yes. So, no matter what angle or perspective or how many perspectives we're looking at this from, we are all looking at an external blown up version of many different things, whether we identify with them or not. They're pushing up against us and they're causing us to have all kinds of reactions. And what those things are doing is they're helping to clear out our being so that we can make room for new ways of being and interacting that are really sustainable and headed more in the direction of perpetual life that's continuing to rejuvenate, is the best way I can put that without putting too much of an ideology on it. I think somebody said, wait, let me see if I can look at the chat if I was taking questions. I will take a question if somebody wants to ask. I don't know how to bring that box back up though. All messages are visible. Oh, there we go. Cool, I can see it now. So someone named Pinyal Sherry. You can ask any question. Well, let's see. This person says, heart problems run in the family too. And tell me, honey, it runs out here. Morphogenetics and morphic fields, as we change and associate ourselves with new people, new associations and patterns and symbolisms, then we bring in more of those subconscious fields. We do certainly bring in the things around us directly into us. We have to be very discerning and careful about that. So yeah, if this person wants to ask a question, go ahead, but I don't think that there was anything else that I wanted to add. I mean, I wrote down some other things, but it's not super related, and it could, I don't know how resolved I am with some of it, so it could light a fire under my ass and talk about something. No, I mean, a fire is good, don't get me wrong, but you know, these days sometimes you have to be careful with these with these various platforms. Okay, well, I'm gonna give you about another 5 minutes. No, not 5 minutes, sorry, 5 seconds or so. Holly says, I'm okay with unrelated and fire. This is just gonna go on YouTube. I usually have a part of me that's like very, all right, we don't want to keep the people, you know, whatever, but we could say that that's the juiciest part of this video, and you can hang out for a minute. Let me see if I can find the page where I added that, all that extra shit. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was, let's see, why does the chat keep disappearing? Soapy Soap, which I think that's Garrick, I'm not sure though, says nice teeth. What do you do to care for them? I just brush them twice a day. I use like a non-fluoridated toothpaste. Dr. Somethings. I've switched my toothpaste a lot though, between all the different natural kinds. And just make sure you floss when you can. But yeah. Anyways, okay, so yeah, what I had written about, I'll do a brief touch on it. Oh, wait, we get the question coming through. Perfect distraction. So I can just focus on this. It's about codependency. I know it's off topic, but codependency is, why is this chat? Codependency is a loss of sense of self. Maybe we repress it. Anyway, how do I get my sense of self back, or how else would you suggest healing? Yeah. So codependency is just like covertly trying to get your needs met. It's covert narcissism, which Teal Swan talks about. That was the first person that I ever heard say that, use that particular terminology, and that really helped me to understand codependency from an objective place, that it's really just a person is like, doesn't think they can get their needs met directly. So you're like, well, yeah, maybe we repress it. Anyway, how do I get my sense of self back? Well, first of all, it's actually really interesting that you would say that, because I'm doing a workshop. Perfect time for a plug. I am doing a workshop though on January 31st about dissolving your external authorities, reclaiming your sovereignty and yourself. So that would probably be a really great workshop for you to come to. But I can still give you a little bit of information here, which would be, you have to just start to get in touch with how you feel. And I would be interested to see, you know, how much capacity you have for being in touch with your own emotions, or how much you can just, oh, sorry, my battery cut out there. How much you get a sense for what feels good for you and what doesn't feel good for you. But one of the things that I've seen Teal recommend is to, sorry, let me go back here. Yeah, is just to start to, like, with everything, with food, with clothes, with TV, with choices, with like literally every single moment of your life, from the moment that you open your eyes. Like, how do I feel? What's going on? How am I, instead of, take yourself off of this automatic autopilot and just start to get a sense for every single thing that's happening. Like, the more present that you are, the more in touch you will be with the truth of who you are, because it will start to be very apparent to you what is in alignment with you, what's not in alignment with you, if you're really here. So when a person says, like, how do I know who I am, or this sense of self that they feel like gets lost in codependency, I mean, if you're in a relationship with another person, you can start to look at what kinds of things am I trying to get from this other person? How am I trying to get them to meet my needs? What is the actual root underneath how I might be manipulating them to meet that need? And then go for that need directly with yourself. And then start to get curious about maybe what other needs you might have. So that would be a good place to start. This person says, are you still around many unconsciousness people? If so, what do you do to deal? What spurred the want to do this video? Well, my mom was the one that spurred me to want to do this video, because she said the Blair back thing. And I would say, yeah, I mean, the majority of the population, and that's a really relative question, is like, how many people are unconscious, right? We're all unconscious, it's just to what degree. And so, yeah, unconscious people are absolutely everywhere. We're all everywhere in all varying degrees. And And lately, my biggest way of dealing with a situation where I feel like there is a large disparity between the perspective or paradigm that I live in and the paradigm that this other person lives in, is to first of all try to understand that where the motivation might be coming from, so that I can really see them as a whole person and not project or have any overlays onto that person. Recognize where their behavior, I just try to understand people, because if you recognize where their behavior is coming from, then you can read them appropriately. You can understand what you're dealing with, what kind of consciousness you're dealing with, and then you can just act respectfully and appropriately, the way that you would want anybody to treat you if you were unaware of something or seemingly acting in a way that was, at least for like short interactions and stuff with just people out there. But I typically don't have, like, the people that are really close to me in my life are very conscious individuals. So who take a lot of responsibility for themselves. So I wouldn't like surround myself with people that I would consider unconscious, because why would I do that? Says, do you happen to have any suggestions for physically meeting new people that are more conscious, matching our frequency during these COVID times? Yeah. I mean, there's so many, like, I know this might sound weird, but there's so many individuals who like kind of have a niche. Like, look at David Palmer, he's an astrologer. Look at the Beast Dealer, he's an astrologer. Look at Teal Swan, look at Matt Kahn, look at, any of these teachers that people resonate with, Avatar, whoever. They have a group of individuals who typically have somewhat similar ideologies. So look at teachers that that's one way. And here's the thing, I really would advise everybody to continue to come back to themselves, right? Not to like continuously be externalizing things onto teachers. But teachers are they're tools. They can be very useful, of course. And they also have a tendency to draw people with a similar ideology together. I know that there's meetup groups that you can do. There's people on Telegram. So look at like certain individuals in those groups. Like, they have private chats on Telegram where you can find out where people are at. I mean, there's a lot actually happening. So I would look into that stuff. What mental health issues do you work in mainly? I don't have a specific niche. Like, I work with the emotions, so I work with the emotional part of a person's experience, also the nervous system, their body in a way. And then, of course, their spirit ends up being tied into everything. But I don't have a specific type of... Sorry, the chat keeps like going away. I don't have a specific niche of like, I work with specifically the mother wound, or like I work with sexual assault survivors, or, the individuals that I have had the honor of being with have a very wide range of where they come from and what their background is and their experiences. But yeah. So I enjoy that diversity. Jess says hi. And then Garrick, I think, says, I would love for this whole generalization of groups of people, for example, ultimative statements about them to decrease. Yeah. Yeah, that's one way. And we can all do that, starting with ourselves, and also just speaking about these things, educating people about the fact that, it starts with us. It starts with every single one of us catching all the stories that we're playing out. looking at the ways in which we might get really addicted to these ways of relating to each other because they're very emotionally charged and they're familiar and they have adrenaline and chemicals and norepinephrine all, you know, attached to them that light up parts of our brain. And so it gets kind of addictive in a way, right? It's like, whew, to fight or to be in polarity and duality. So we do have to recognize the ways in which those hits can be actually quite addictive, and we do need to continue to come back to, or really to move forward into a unity consciousness, which is able to accommodate for multiple perspectives simultaneously. Says, I'm with you, sis. And we have to hold space for those that can't see they're dualistic and haven't experienced the 5D vibration. Okay, I just want to say something about 5D, because I've seen a lot of people. So I want to say, yes, we have to hold space for everyone, or, you know, treat them respectfully and just coexist the best we can. It's a lot's happening though. It's a tall order. That's for fucking sure. But so here's the thing about 5D is that, hold on. You guys really like, okay, I'm just gonna, this is obviously now we're going into my perspective. Take it or leave it. Take it for what it is. We really have to understand that whole situation, like the reason why 5D feels so familiar to people, and like when they're like, yeah, we're ascending into 5D, is because at one point that is what we were supposed to do. So that's actually written in your DNA. But 5D has been hijacked in a sense. It's being rehabilitated, but it has been, a lot of it's been inverted, and it's like, that's not the way that we are expanding our consciousness. If you want to think about it from like a multidimensional layered perspective, the whole idea, the 5D thing, it's like, it literally would make sense why people felt drawn to it. Because at one point that was the thing. But 5D is like no, we're 12th dimensional beings. So we have to like really like see that that's its own kind of frequency net. That's its own kind of like cap. Just expand yourself way beyond that, okay? You can tap directly into your 12th dimensional self. You don't need to worry about, we're not going through 5D anymore. For most of us, that's not what's happening. A lot of people are getting stuck in 5D because of all of those reversals. So it's like doing weird shit. It's like a weird program. Now you're getting into my weird, like, spiritual self, okay? But take it for what, you know, feel into it for yourself. But for me, that's what's happening. What's the intention behind inversion? I mean, that is like, inversion is what happens when you want to create something outside of the context of eternal life. And you just cut off from everything else around you. And when you cut off from everything else around you, you don't have any energy to feed you because you're not connected. So now you have to manipulate and trick your way into siphoning energy and getting resources because you can't get it yourself. You have to use other people to do that. Does that make sense? Other energies, other forces, other beings. Okay. Jan says, I guess my question is, how do, I think that means to say, how do we know when we are remembering / experiencing 12th dimension? I mean, I don't know if that's something that I could answer for you. The best way that I could describe what I think being in touch with your 12th dimensional self means is it's a place of complete non-emotional neutrality. But there's a consciousness about that, though, which makes it so that it's informed creation. But it's a very neutral kind of thing. And I would say love. But not in like the high on drugs kind of love. Something very pure. Eternal. So this person says, oh, you guys have a lot of questions. Okay, so a part of inversion is perceiving a powerless state. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is ultimate powerlessness behind the carrying out of inverted matrices. I have no idea what we're talking about. Oh, perfect. You're just along for the ride. I love that, Tyler. Okay. Garrick says, I heard the message, integrate the devil. Okay. We should talk about that a little bit, if you really want to go there. My perspective on that is that, I think at a certain point, it can be very, very, very beneficial for a person to see all things in the universe as part of themselves. Because it allows you to take self-responsibility for your own emotions so that you don't continue to play into victim-victimizer dynamics, which is very, very common and easy for people to fall into. That being said, to go back up, when we talk about integrating something like integrating the devil, where I sit right now in my understanding is that there's two forms of oneness. You can be consumed by it and you will be one with it. Or you can recognize those forces at play where they are and choose to operate in a different frequency. Not out of spite or hate but from a place of really consciously understanding what you're doing and what you're creating and why you're creating that. So, I don't know. That's what comes to mind when I think someone says, I heard the message, integrate the devil. I would say, think about that for yourself. This person says, how to heal from dissociation. It's actually interesting. I just saw somebody look into like the 7 different kinds of dissociation that they've talked about. I'm sure it's just another way of labeling things, but there's a lot of different ways that dissociation manifests. But the way that I understand it is that it can be like a person who has a chronic freeze response. And so it's actually a very, very high state of arousal within the system, but it's so high that the system goes into like a freeze or just shoots out. Like you feel like the consciousness is literally coming like up and out of the body. Usually when you're dealing with that, I would say you have to slow everything down. So with that person, you need to speak very slowly. You might need to put yourself in an environment that's very, there's not a ton going on. Maybe something that feels a little bit more containing. There's things that you can do, like put your hands on top of your head like this. You might notice some of the consciousness coming back into the body. But ultimately, you might also just have to go directly in the direction of the dissociation and just go, okay, well, where am I? If I'm not here, well, where am I? Where does it feel like I'm at? And start from there. Notice where the consciousness is. Understand that consciousness. Why is it dissociated? What happened? See if you can have a conversation with that aspect of yourself, or seek out a practitioner or a professional who can help you, guide you through that. That's something that I do with individuals, but it seems like those would be my two places. Without having you right in front of me and knowing anything more about it, those would be two routes that I would suggest, is either go towards the dissociation and find out what's going on, when did that come on, or slow everything down, create maybe a space for more for containment so the nervous system can come out. But don't be surprised that if you are in freeze, if that is what's happening with this, which we don't know, then you will notice that you might go through anger, or something that feels really uncomfortable, because you're actually hitting the fight or flight response, which is actually underneath the freeze. And then that's before you will go back down into baseline. But also for some people, let's say they were in a particularly oppressive environment where something like fight or flight would have been absolutely unacceptable, you might see that the person has an internal mechanism that doesn't allow, once the system starts to tick into fight or flight, that their system will just go back into. So sometimes, if that's the case, if it's really, deeply ingrained within the person's system, to work with somebody who's going to be able to catch that and help the system to actually go into that next wave without being flagged internally. So there's a lot of different variables at play there. Let's see. And then, oh my god, this light is killing me, you guys. I'm gonna have to get off here soon. This is not a sustainable solution. But it was so dark. This person is ADD something like dissociation. That's a good question. I don't know. I tend to get, I think that with ADD, my understanding is that the environment is overly stimulating for that person. And so it's not that the person can't focus, it's that they want to focus on whatever they want to focus on because that particular thing is soothing them from their overstimulated system. So, I mean, if the person dissociated as a result of having perhaps a particularly stressful environment, then they could have comorbidities like symptom clusters that you see with ADD or dissociation. I would be interested to have that person in front of me though and see, because we have to really remember that with a lot of this diagnosis and this labeling, there's a lot that happens in the psyche when we start to diagnose and be diagnosed. There's a lot of identity formation, loss of identity through diagnoses. So we have to look at the ways that plays into our own psychology. And, ultimately these are trauma adaptations and responses. And we could, maybe it's helpful in some situations to label them, to understand what are the patterns that we're recognizing here. But we do also have to go beyond that and really just see these as normal trauma responses that anybody would endure given the way that our society is currently structured. Says, I personally enjoy using skull cap to help ease me back into my body when I find myself dissociating. Great. Maybe that'll work for someone else. I think autism would be a type of dissociation, nerve damage from toxins, foods, vaccines, causing a constant parasympathetic response. I'm much calmer the more I stick to a clean diet. Yeah, I tend to see autism more as a neurodivergence as a result of needing to shift our collective consciousness. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's also physical mutations perhaps in the DNA. I don't know enough about that. Sounds like you've had experience with it though. And that's great that your diet, I think that helps for a lot of people who are on the spectrum, is cleaning up their diet. My cousin is autistic, and that helped a lot with him especially when he was a toddler, and obviously still now, but he's much older. Labeling for me makes me feel trapped and yes, like attached to the label versus allowing myself to be me and release these experiences. Yeah, because you're not those things, you know what I mean? Like, those are just symptoms. And so if you heal the trauma and you integrate those experiences and you alter your environment, then, then you don't, that's not you then. You're working with a different form of consciousness. So, that kind of brings us back to the beginning. It's like people really do found a lot of their identities on their own ailments and what is not going right for them, instead of really looking at, well, why and what do I really need to do to fix that, to change that, if I really wanted to. Have I heard of the book? Yeah, Yvette Rose, Metaphysical Anatomy. I use it all the time. I have it up on my shelf. But all right, you guys, it's been pretty long here, so I'm going to sign off. But I'm so happy that you guys all came on and asked questions. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. So, yeah. I don't typically have that kind of an experience on Instagram lately, so maybe I'll come back and do another live next week on here. All right, you guys have a wonderful evening. Love you so much.